we'll start with this. Well, WBO super middleweight champion Billy Joe Saunders had this to say. He says, "I'd love to fight Golovkin in Kazakhstan." You see, this past weekend, it just so happens that the WBO super middleweight champion Billy Joe Saunders was taking in a card in Gennady Golovkin's neck of the woods. He was in town in Kazakhstan, and he issued a public call-out to what is the former unified middleweight champion. He says he thinks he's a brilliant fighter, and he would love to fight him there in his own backyard. And this is a fight that could have, and by all rights, should have taken place a long time ago. You know, that entire duration of time that Billy Joe Saunders was the reigning WBO champion in the middleweight division, you know, that whole time, it was a bit of an uneventful reign for him. And this is at a time when, you know, Golovkin, he's waiting for Canelo to come around. He's waiting for that fight to happen. And in the in-between time, there really was a window of opportunity for a unification fight. But Billy, you know, he was dragging his feet in the beginning, and he didn't decide to shoot for it until around the time that Golovkin was going to be squaring off against Canelo. You know, when that fight was finally materializing, that's when Billy Joe Saunders really decided to take the bull by the horns and challenge what was the middleweight boogeyman. But by then, it was too late. You know, day late, dollar short. You know, most people's memories of these situations, they may be a bit hazy as time has passed, but what you need to remember is, you know, the Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin conversation, just as a conversation, not even the fight itself, the conversation picked up steam towards the end of 2015. But those two guys didn't actually fight till well over a year later in 2017, whereas Billy Joe Saunders' window of opportunity to establish himself as a middleweight king of any kind was in 2016. And he only fought once that year. He only fought once against Artur Akhvov, didn't look too good, didn't look too hot, and didn't do much else for the rest of the year. But that year, that would have been the window of opportunity for him to decide that, you know what, this Canelo and Golovkin fight hasn't happened yet. It doesn't appear to be happening. You know, Canelo, he fought Amir Khan, and then he went down to 154 to fight, you know, Liam Smith for his belt. So if that's not going on, this is my chance to step into the limelight. This is my opportunity to challenge what is the middleweight boogeyman and show the world that I'm better than him. You understand? There was a window of opportunity there in 2016 before the Canelo-Golovkin fight materialized in 2017 for Billy Joe Saunders to do something of note. And, you know, it didn't happen soon enough. Now, Billy Joe Saunders is at super middleweight. He's a world champion there once again via the WBO. And we are becoming reacquainted with what could be a fight between Golovkin and Saunders. And I'll tell you that given Golovkin's current situation, what's going on with him, what's going on with DAZN, what's going on with Canelo, and all these potential opponent opportunities, of which Gennady Golovkin is only one, given everything that's happening, I'd say right about now is the right time to have that fight. Reintroduce that conversation to the boxing fans. Why? Gennady Golovkin's not a champion anywhere. He's not holding any belts at middleweight, and he's not holding any belts at super middleweight. So he doesn't have any, you know, obligations to a sanctioning body that would stifle his ability to negotiate a fight. And Canelo Alvarez, he doesn't seem all that interested in having a rubber match with Gennady Golovkin, whereas Golovkin wants it. Canelo, you know, he doesn't seem too enthused about it. He's not that interested. So if you're Gennady Golovkin and Canelo doesn't want to give you the time of day, you've got to look at what else is out there. And we see what's out there. We see guys like, you know, Jermall Charlo, the WBC champion. We see guys out there like Demetrius Andrade, the WBO champion. And these are both guys who would relish the opportunity to fight Gennady Golovkin, especially at this stage. They'd love to have a name like that on their resume. And, you know, those are good options. I mean, I'm not against any of those fights. I think any one of those fights would be a great fight. But none of those guys have the backstory and the backdrop that a Billy Joe Saunders brings to the table, because Billy Joe Saunders and Gennady Golovkin, they both happen to have been champions at the same time, yet they never fought. You know, Gennady Golovkin, remember when he used to want all the belts? You understand?
I remember.
But that just never quite materialized. So Billy Joe Saunders brings a backstory to the table that those two guys don't bring to the table, even though any one of those three fights would be a great fight. Golovkin's got a bit more history with Saunders than he's got with either of them. You know, these guys have only recently become champions. For Gennady Golovkin, the idea of becoming a champion in the middleweight division, you know, I don't know how he looks at that. Seems like a been there and done that kind of a situation. But what if Gennady Golovkin fulfilled a demand that was placed before him, given some quotes from him and his trainer about anybody from 154 to 168. What if Gennady Golovkin at this point in the juncture decided to take Billy Joe Saunders up on his challenge, moves up to super middleweight, you know, fights as a full-fledged super middleweight, and challenges Saunders for what is his WBO title. Two-division champion. It's got a ring to it, doesn't it? If Gennady Golovkin were to go up there and beat Billy Joe Saunders, he would effectively become a two-division champion and satisfy that need, that request from the fans, I should say, to see him, challenge himself at another weight. This guy said he'll take on anybody from 154 to 168, but he never actually did. For some people, that's still a sore spot. For some people, they still, they think of that and they say that this guy's all talk because he said that, but he never actually went anywhere. He just sat right there waiting for Canelo. Well, you know what? Canelo's not giving you the time of day. You don't got any belts. So what's stopping you? What's stopping you from taking up Saunders on that challenge? Two-division champion really does have a nice ring to it. And I think it's the right time for that fight. You think about the fight and what could get in the way of it. A lot of times the politics of boxing, commitments to networks, these are the things that stifle a fight, right? Well, think about it this way. Where Billy Joe Saunders may face some difficulties trying to pin down a Callum Smith, it being that they both fight for rival promoters that have commitments to rival networks. In the case of Gennady Golovkin, that's not the case. He doesn't have any content or exclusivity deals, multi-fight commitments with any UK broadcasters. So that's less, that's one less problem to have to deal with. You can maybe stage it at a venue over there in the UK, put it on BT Sport, and for the people here stateside, they can watch it on DAZN, or vice versa. You stage it here stateside on DAZN, and then the people over there in the UK can watch it via BT Sport. But one way or another, you can say that a Golovkin versus Saunders fight may be a bit more easy to negotiate than a, Saunders versus Callum Smith fight. I know that some people might be wondering, well, where does ESPN fit into the picture? Because a lot of Frank Warren's guys, they are in bed with ESPN, but need I remind you that ESPN is not as determined in establishing Saunders as a big player here stateside as they are with Tyson Fury. Saunders' last fight, that was staged over there in the UK, so I really don't view that as a potential hindrance or roadblock to what could be a Saunders versus Golovkin fight. And for Gennady Golovkin, this isn't 2016 or 2015 or 2014 where just guys are partying around the prospect of fighting Golovkin like a river around a rock. This isn't a couple of years ago. There are a lot of guys on the table, a lot of world title opportunities via it being Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andrade or Billy Joe Saunders, an opportunity for Golovkin to become a two-division champion. I don't see what he's so busy with, aside from campaigning for a rubber match with Canelo. I don't see what he's so busy with that's not an attractive option. And I want you guys to understand something. I am not disavowing that Gennady Golovkin was, for a time, one of the most avoided fighters out there. There was that time where guys like Felix Sturm, they didn't want nothing to do with him. Sergio Martinez, he was kept away from him via Lou DiBella, and Lou DiBella admitted it. Golovkin's an animal. He's not going to put Sergio in there with him. We know that Cotto didn't want that fight. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be honest with ourselves. Billy Joe Saunders, this guy couldn't find the time, and when he did find the time, when he finally found the time, guess what? You're a day late, you're $1 short, because this guy's going into a Canelo fight. He's not going to prioritize you over a Canelo fight, you understand? So there was a time when Golovkin, the prospect of facing him, it wasn't a prospect that anybody was too crazy about. There was a time, but guess what? Golovkin has built his name up enough that the time has passed. We're not in that era anymore where Golovkin has to struggle to participate in an important fight against an important fighter of some kind of value, more so than in previous eras, you understand? I mean, there are guys out there who really want to fight this guy. They do bring something to the table, whether it's Jermall Charlo's WBC title, or Demetrius Andrade's WBO title, or Billy Joe Saunders' WBO title. There are fights out there, and it's not even limited to those three guys. I mean, what's stopping Gennady Golovkin from saying, hey, you know what? Callum Smith is on the same side of the street as me, you understand? There are network ties there that could see him facing a fighter like that if that's what he wanted. If Gennady Golovkin went on to say that he's receptive to a fight with a fighter like Callum Smith, he could get that fight. You understand? So this really isn't even about bashing the fighter so much as discussing the current situation. A lot of people, they get stuck in the past. They look at things with blinders on based on things that happened as opposed to what is happening. And what's happening right now is that there are a lot of possibilities for Gennady Golovkin. He's on DAZN. They're paying this guy a lot of money. And I don't think they're paying this guy a lot of money to square off against pedestrian opponents while he waits for Canelo Alvarez to give him a rubber match. I don't think that's what they had in mind when they signed him. that if Canelo's not receptive to you right now, guess what? There are other good fighters out there. You might want to give one of them a call. I mean, that's all I'm saying. You know, some people out there, they're really big on Golovkin, and they get really fucking excited watching him beat the crap out of guys like Steve Rolls or Vanez Martirosyan or Kell Brook, but that's pedestrian competition for one of the best middleweights in the world. That's pedestrian competition. So what's the exciting part? Where's the intrigue when you know before the fight how the fight will end? There's not much of a chance of guys like that beating a Gennady Golovkin. So what's the exciting part? You know, there's guys that they're perfectly content watching Gennady Golovkin fight those kinds of guys. And you know what? I'm not.
Sorry, I'm just not.
You know, Gennady Golovkin's professional record, it was subject of some debate for some time. You know, how are you supposed to interpret it? You know, I always said that as far as middleweights go, you know, at that time, and that crop of middleweights, that as far as middleweights go and as far as middleweight resumes go, Golovkin's resume was solid. For a middleweight, that's saying that you've been in this weight class and you fought these top contenders when top contenders were there. You did that, so as far as middleweight resumes go, it's okay, but in the greater scheme of things, the resume really isn't much to look at. I mean, it's just not. And this has always been my stance on Golovkin's resume because, yes, he was a dominant champion in his weight class, and he was. But let's be honest with ourselves. You know, he held 3 of the 4 major titles at the weight. 3 of the 4. He only actually beat one active reigning champion, though. That was David Lemieux when he took his IBF. The WBA title, he didn't beat a champion to get that belt. It was, you know, something that he was elevated into. The WBC title. This is a title that was handed over to him after Canelo vacated it to get out of abiding by the WBC's order, and that in no way, shape, or form makes it okay for Canelo to have done that, but better still, you see other guys that still have to fight for a vacant title, whereas Golovkin, he didn't have to fight for his. They just gave it to him. The Ring Magazine title, you know, Golovkin had complained that he was never crowned the Ring Magazine champion, and that title was also handed over to him. So what you can say is that, okay, in the realm of middleweights and as far as middleweights go, this guy definitely showed that he's one of the best, but in the greater scheme of things, in the bigger picture, how does Golovkin compare with a guy like a Vasyl Lomachenko or an Alexander Usyk or a Terence Crawford? These guys that are beating champions, moving up and beating champions at their weight and taking their belts. You know, how does it look that Alexander Usyk got it done against what is honestly a far better quality of competition than anything Golovkin has seen? Alexander Usyk's quality of competition, you know, makes Gennady Golovkin's pale in comparison, and he got it done. He got the job done. He became the undisputed champion, and he's already in the process of moving up. Whereas here today, you know, 30-something, 40, whatever, however many fights later, Golovkin has yet to do that same thing. Essentially what I'm getting at is the door is not closed for Golovkin to add to his legacy. It's not closed. There are fights, there are fighters out there, there is opportunity out there.
Plenty of it.
But if he doesn't capitalize on these opportunities, if he doesn't go after these kinds of situations and he just, you know, maintains his desire to fight Canelo and only Canelo as if that's the only meaningful fight that's out there for him, if he just, you know, continues on that path, how will the annals of boxing history remember him when they look back and they see who he fought? And yeah, you know, you got a decent name or two in a Daniel Jacobs. You got a David Lemieux in there. But what are they going to say about guys like Gabe Rosado? You know, what are they going to say about guys like that? I mean, Gabe, God bless him, but he's a journeyman. We all know that. What are they going to say about Steve Rolls? You think they're going to be falling out of their seat that you beat Steve Rolls? Kell Brook? You think that's what's going to do it? Nothing against the Dominic Wade fight. I know that is a fight that he had to have in defense of his IBF title. I understand that. I'm just saying that what does beating him mean when, you know, he hasn't accomplished anything? These are the names that grace Gennady Golovkin's resume, ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not. And when you look at those fighters and see what they did that makes them meaningful opponents, you don't see much. So, you know, there are opportunities out there for this guy. That's all I'm saying. The book's not closed on the career of Gennady Golovkin, but I'll tell you that based on what's there so far, those eggs need more bacon. Because I'll tell you, you know, history's not kind to everybody. And when you think about certain things that happened in Gennady Golovkin's career, how, you know, basically having that Vanez Martirosyan fight against a guy who hadn't fought in 2 years, he's done absolutely nothing as a middleweight. The last fight he had was a junior middleweight, and that was a fight that he lost. You know, you bring up that guy, IBF tells you they're not going to sanction the fight. You try to, you know, work something out with them, and they tell you, look, we're still not going to sanction that fight, but we'll make a deal. We'll cut you a deal. We'll let you fight that guy without stripping you, so long as you satisfy your mandatory challenger next. Whereas if you had never tried to fight Vanez at all, you would have never had to cut a deal. I mean, that is what got Gennady Golovkin stripped of the IBF title, ladies and gentlemen, fighting the likes of a Vanez Martirosyan. And what was that intended for? You know, why even look at that guy? To preserve himself for who? Canelo Alvarez. Too much time, too much effort on Golovkin's part has been spent on Canelo, and I honestly feel like it's time to close that chapter. You know, people are going to feel how they're going to feel, but it may be time to just move on completely from that. Because, you know, Golovkin did what he had to do as a middleweight, but there are still names like Vanez Martirosyan, Kell Brook, Gabe Rosado, you know, Steve Rolls, Dominic Wade. You know, these kinds of names that they don't add anything to the resume, you know? I mean, they really don't.
Not much, anyway.
But there still is a window of opportunity for Golovkin to add to the luster. And his fans, let me tell you guys something. Let me tell you one fucking thing. If you guys think he's all that in a bag of fucking chips, then you shouldn't be protesting the idea that he could fight a Callum Smith or a Demetrius Andrade or a Billy Joe Saunders or a Charlo. If you think he's the big bad wolf, if that's what you think of him, you think he's the best, then why would you be in opposition of him fighting those kinds of fighters? You think he can beat them, right? So what's the problem? That's all I'm saying, guys. The time for excuses is just about over. That's all I'm communicating. There are good fights out there for him, and I'm hoping that his very next fight is a good fight, with or without Canelo.